Okay, good. Gary, it's good to have you back in South Africa, I
It's
must
fabulous
say.
to be back. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really, really awesome to talk about this very important subject of entrepreneurship education, specifically now in schools. I think, sure, I can't tell you how our country has been over the last few years, but what I can tell you, I think now more than ever, we haven't improved our sort of job employment rate. We've got new problems that need to be solved. And the thing about our unemployment is that it hits a lot of young people. We've got millions of young people that are not in school, that are not in education. And even the ones that are in education, as you might have heard, a lot of studies show that we're preparing young people for jobs that don't even exist yet. And I just really wanted to get a sense from you in terms of what do we need to do as a country, specifically as an education system, to be preparing our young people for these times that have been called the VUCA times, that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Yeah, so that's a really good question to be asking, first of all. And I think, Zim, if we're going to start from 35,000 feet, we have to understand the sort of the origins, like what compels people to be innovative and entrepreneurial, and what are the things that discourage one from being innovative and entrepreneurial, right? And so I'm going to start from the perspective that non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned.
Non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned. How so? That's an interesting way. You would think that is the opposite, right?
Correct. And so let's start there, right? So not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur as we traditionally think of it, or be a business owner. And not everyone should be. It's very, very difficult. We now live in a world that requires everyone to think like an entrepreneur. That doesn't mean start a business necessarily, but it means that every young person will need to learn how to identify and solve problems within resource-constrained, ambiguous environments where the rules are not clear, the path is not well defined, right?
Yeah.
That is what entrepreneurs do, right? And so by teaching people how to develop entrepreneurial attitudes, behaviors, and skills. And I shouldn't even say it that way. I should say to cultivate this, to catalyze this, because when I said to you, Zim, that the non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned, what I'm saying is that not everyone wants to start a business, but all humans have an innate desire to be engaged in work that matters, to be able to solve problems, to see their work impacting people around them in a positive way. And they need to see a path towards something more meaningful and prosperous for themselves.
Well,
Right?
that's sort of, you used a very interesting word there to say you can't actually teach it, you need to cultivate it. So what do you believe sort of is the role of educators in cultivating? Should schools get involved at all, or should they just be focused on getting through curriculum? In some schools we argue that we don't even have enough time just to go through curriculum. Why should we be taking on something extra?
Yeah, and that's an interesting, we don't have enough time for the curriculum as it is. And I spoke at a conference in Pennsylvania of 1,000 educators, education leaders. And someone tweeted back at me and said, what we need to do is not put entrepreneurship into the curriculum, we need to put curriculum into entrepreneurship, which is in itself a very interesting idea, right? Here's what I'm saying, that let me define entrepreneurship very simply as opportunity discovery process.
Okay.
It's driven by this very simple but mostly tacit assumption that it's up to me to figure out how to make myself useful to my fellow human.
How to make myself useful to
Right?
my fellow human.
And the more useful I become to other humans, the better off I'm going to be. So it's almost like enlightened self-interest,
Yes.
which seems very simple, right? It's very straightforward idea. But when you consider this in the context of the industrial era thinking, that we're teaching young people to think like employees. We're teaching them to think, you're going to work in an established organization where the useful thing has already been figured out
Yes.
by someone else. So you don't need those skills. You need delivery skills. You don't need the discovery skills. What the data show is that when you engage students in discovery type learning, they will develop the creativity, the critical thinking, the communication, the collaboration, the resilience, the resourcefulness, all of these skills, the self-directed behaviors that are required for them to thrive. Okay.
Would you maybe give us an example on how at ELI, this engaging students in this discovery process in such a way that teachers can almost see how it would work in the classroom? What does that entrepreneurial learning or cultivating look like on a Monday in a school?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm going to start at 35,000 feet and then I'll come down to on the ground, okay?
Sure.
So I like this quote from Jaime Casap at Google Education. He said, stop asking the students what they want to be when they grow up and start asking them what problems they want to solve and what they need to learn in order to solve those problems, right?
Sure.
So I think that's what, so first and foremost, as the educators, we have to understand these sort of basic assumptions in our own mindset that are deeply held and unconscious assumptions about what the student is going to do in the world, right? And the employee mindset assumptions that are there, right? But I think that the very practical, simple idea here, Zim, is allow students some time to identify and solve problems that they care about in a resource-constrained, ambiguous environment. Right? Now, that sounds very simple, and it is simple. I mean, it's not easy to do, but it's a simple formula. But in order to do this, we need to see relatable social models. Right? So I need to see other people. I need to see examples of other people who have succeeded in this domain, who have come from similar circumstances that the student, is coming from, who are succeeding in doing this.
I think you've mentioned several important points, but I want to pick up on this one of relatable role models. How do we do that, especially if you think of us in South Africa, where sort of the GEM reports come back saying our entrepreneurial activity is very low, we don't have an entrepreneurial culture as a nation, and also entrepreneurs, it maybe also talks to demystifying entrepreneurship. We see them as the people that came up with the breakthrough ideas and did the big things that we haven't seen somebody else next to us having done them. The Silicon Valley type of entrepreneurship that in every city we're trying to have a silicon something. Right.
Well, yeah, so we need to, I mean, it's a really good point. Is that we have to start by redefining entrepreneurship in a way that every student can participate. And mostly, we're currently defining it in this very narrow way, right? The Silicon Valley, whiz kids that come up with some big idea and they're billionaires and that's such a tiny infinitesimal percentage of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, if you will, right? And for most people, students, teachers, anyone, this is either irrelevant or just completely out of reach, right? So let's start by redefining entrepreneurship in a way that everyone can embrace it. And I like to use the simple definition of it as a discovery process, an opportunity discovery process, right? So if you think of it this way, if you have 100 students in a room and you ask how many want to start your own business, maybe 25 or so will start their own business. In the United States, I think it's 3 out of 1,000 will start a business.
3 out of 1,000.
And that's down from 7. It's going down. It's not good, right?